I spoke with Lana Nusseibeh, the UAE's ambassador to the UN and president of the World Body's Women Executive Board. Well, I began by asking her just how important it is to have women in government and how to attract even more women into service. This is what she said.
Thank you very much, Becky. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, celebrating International Women's Day. But not only celebrating, I think it's important to note that today we are trying to accelerate our efforts to achieve gender equality and empowerment around the world. At current rates, according to recent data, the World Economic Forum data, at current rates we would not close the gender gap until 2186, and that's simply too long to wait. So today is an opportunity for a call to action to step up, men and women, for change around the world. Now, the reason we know that to be important is very much the reason you highlighted at the beginning of this interview, which is in the UAE, we know that this model works for us. It doesn't just work as a national strategy, it works as a global smart foreign policy strategy, and it is integrated into our security, economic, political, social development model. So the same data that shows that it would take almost 100 years to close the gender gap globally shows that in the UAE we have the most empowered women in the region. We have the smallest gender gap in the region. Women are the most literate in the region. Over 66% of our population are women in the workforce. As you've rightly pointed out, we have the first Speaker of Parliament who is a woman in the region, and she's made great strides in that regard. A third of our cabinet are women, and also in non-typical roles, whether it's the military, the judiciary, as judges, as police officers, women are breaking every glass ceiling in the UAE, and this is integrating into a holistic development model that has made our model, we believe, in the region a counter to extremism and terrorism. And unfortunately, extremist and terrorist ideology in our region ties itself very much to the subjugation of women. So this is a counter to extremism and terrorism in our region. It's an opportunity for hope at a time when we are facing enormous and very protracted global crises. So I think the UAE model really is a model not only nationally, but it could be a model that we humbly offer to the world as an international model for why integrating women into your economies, into your societies is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Now, you make some really good points here, but let's be frank, the Middle East, as in other parts of the world, is an area, a region where women do clearly face challenges. The Wilson Centre, for one, highlights issues of physical violence in some countries. In parts of the region, women are being pushed out of public life. The constitutions of Egypt and Tunisia, for example, are very vague when it comes to women's rights. So, as a role model, how can the UAE help effect change?
By showing why it works when you integrate women into your workforce. I think we want to show by doing, not by preaching, and I think that's always been very much our model, but we do it quietly because the model works for us. I think we very much respect the diversity and the plurality of different countries and their systems. What we're showing is that you can be a modern country, a Muslim country, a tolerant country with over 200 nationalities residing side by side, and yes, women can lead in that country by example, and because of the example set by the leadership, by Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak al-Kitbi and her national strategy to empower women, by the Prime Minister's commitment just at the last World Government Summit that in 5 years he wants 50% of his cabinet to be women. So there are men and women at the top who are advocating for change because it makes sense. And I think showing by doing is the best way that the UAE can show that this model really does bring more sustainable peace and more sustainable economic and political development. I mean, the numbers are also there. If people who like data can look at the data. McKinsey shows that we could increase our global GDP by $12 trillion by 2025 just by closing the gender gap in the workplace. In the MENA region, that's an increase of 15% over projected long-term growth. So for the data buffs, the numbers are there to show that integrating women into your economies makes economic and business sense. We also know in terms of our work here at the United Nations, in terms of peace agreements and keeping the peace, that when women are at the table, peace agreements are more likely to last 15 years rather than fail after 5.
Wow.
So we have those numbers as well. When women are integrated at the table in women, peace and security efforts, and as you've pointed out, our region is going through a challenging time. When women are integrated in those efforts, the peace agreement is more likely to last 15 years because women bring integrated perspectives into the negotiations. It's not simply about power sharing, it's about education, communities, access to water, access to justice, the issues you've raised, domestic violence. Justice should be something that is applied even after a conflict has ended. That's something we very much believe in the United Arab Emirates. And it's something my country has never had to have a debate about. We're at the forefront of this issue, both in our support to UN Women, the entity here in the UN that's mandated to lead the charge on global equality. And our support for that entity has been there at the outset from 2010. And my role as president of the executive board, that's something that I'm very much integrating in the facilitation of dialogue amongst member states on this issue. So we lead by doing. We put our financial commitment where we believe it to be practical and applicable, and we want to show that the data shows that this is the right model around the world. But again, we offer our model humbly, taking into account that every society evolves at its own pace and its own way, and we are not perfect ourselves.
Ambassador, who am I to argue with anything that you have just said on what is International Women's Day? It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Congratulations, Becky, on International Women's Day. Thank you for the work that you do.